In this chapter, I'm going to get everything ready to go into Substance Painter. And the first operation that I'm starting to do is merging the arms and feet that I previously detached from the body, and I created a much higher resolution mesh for displacement in ZBrush. So here I'm merging the pieces. And after that, I'm just welding all the vertices, making sure that is merged in a really clean way. And sometimes, as you can see, I have to go from the inside of the geometry and check that they're really welded properly. So in this way, I just get one mesh for shading and rigging. Second step, I'm separating objects by material, or I should say grouping objects by material. In this way, for each one of these material, when I import these into Substance, it's going to create a texture set. I understand that later when we go into Substance. What I'm thinking about now is separating in the most efficient way possible. For example, I try to group all the skin together. Then I group all the cloth that I want to texture later on as a one material together, like for example the shirt. And then I'm separating these wrist and leg pieces. And then I'm going to add a different material for the pants. So you can see here I'm changing color, so it's also really easy to visualize. And this is going to help me later on to create ID masks. One thing to keep in mind is that you should only use Maya standard materials like Lambert, fawn, or Blinn material. And don't use Arnold materials because in my experience they don't work when you go into Substance Painter. That is something that maybe will be improved in the future, but at the current time with the software I'm using, that doesn't really work. So keep that in mind as well. Now I'm jumping to other pieces like these, which I call bubbles. And now I'm starting also to separate the ropes with another material and giving another color. In a bit I'm going to jump to the backpack. Here I'm starting on the backpack and I'm following exactly the same steps, separating again materials. Here I'm giving all the same material for all these ropes and trying to be as efficient as possible. For example, I group all the ropes that are on the back and on the wood parts. So then when I'm going to texture, will be really easy to isolate these materials for the next step. Here I'm giving another color for the other ropes, which are holding the umbrella and this pin roll. And I'm going to go on other objects now. I'm going to isolate these blankets and wooden parts and follow the same procedure. Also be mindful of where these objects are in the UV and try as much as possible not to mix materials. I especially prefer never to mix different materials in the same UV space. And this is something that you maybe would be doing in video games, but for film pipeline is something that I really suggest not to do. I'm going forward here and starting to do the fabric parts. So I'm trying to keep all under one material, so all this fabric and all these little elements, I think I'm going to group it together under one material. It's going to be a very similar kind of wood. Here there's another piece, and you see how they are grouped. So all the wood pieces I tend to put in one group and one material. Some of the ropes in one group, some other ropes in different groups, and the blanket and carpet in another group. Here I'm going to add another material for the little piece of wood holding the belts, and I'm pretty much done. At the end of this I'm going to export 2 FBX, one for the backpack and another for the character. This is going to make my life much easier in Substance Painter, because I'm going to paint the 2 items separate in 2 separate scenes, which will be much lighter and easy to manage. And only at the end I'm going to put everything together in Maya and Arnold. Sometimes you really need to split your pieces, because otherwise they get really heavy and difficult to manage. I'm now back into ZBrush, and I'm starting to do another quite important operation. I'm taking the pieces and I'm going to start to decimate them one by one. It's going to be quite a long operation, but in this way I'm going to keep as much as possible all these high resolution sculpt, and in this way I'm reducing the amount of polygons that are going to go inside the Substance Painter than for the baking. I wouldn't recommend to import an object that is 30 or 40 million polygons into Substance Painter for baking. In this way I'm trying to reduce each item to a 500,000 or 250,000 polygons most of the time. I would say don't go over 1 million polygon for each piece. So now I'm just basically decimating the head, and that's one of the heaviest pieces. Second piece, I'm going to go now into the body and do a decimation. Then I'm going to go to the legs and try to go around 250,000 polygon each, I think. This operation take quite some time, and sometimes you may crash along the way, so I recommend to save often, very often. And now I merge down the 2 pieces. And I'm going to do another decimation. The important thing is that you keep as much as possible the sculpted details, and you reduce to a decent number. Now I decimated around 250,000 polygons. That looks pretty good. I'm going to jump to the next. Always rename your tools. It's really important to get your tools well organized and named. You won't believe how important it is to have organization skills in this job. And always imagine that you work in a pipeline, you don't work alone, and you need to give well organized scene to other people, named correctly. Now I'm going to do the hands. Naming conventions, try to respect and organize with names, even when you work on your own project, but above all, when you work in a production pipeline, believe me, people is not going to like it if you hand over scenes or file without naming or with bad naming. Many times they're going to send you back the files and ask you to rename it, and then will be a problem. So now I'm finalizing the hands, trying to get them around 250,000 polygons again. Usually give me quite a good resolution. Now I merge down the body, so in this way I have just one mesh for the body, the hands and the feet. I'm continuing to reorganize the tools, and in a bit I'm going to start to work on the shirt. Now I'm going to start to work on the shirt, and it's a 4 million polygon subtool, and I'm going to decimate again. This was decimated to 250,000 polygons, and I'm basically going down to each subtool and continue to repeat these steps. Now the decimation process is finished, and I'm going to export all these decimated subtools with the help of Subtool Master. Subtool Master is an extremely useful plugin, and in this case I'm only exporting the visible tools, so I made sure just to make visible the tools that I want to export, and Subtool Master is going to do the rest of the job for me. Now I'm going to show you how to set up a project in Substance Painter. So you go File New, and this is the window that pop up. As a template, you're going to use ASM PBR Metallic Roughness SSS in this case, because we want to just preview some SSS in the frog. Document resolution, you can start at 124. I could start at 2K. The normal format, I'm going to use OpenGL because Arnold uses OpenGL, and I'm going to render in Arnold. Compute tangent space per fragment, I don't need it. You would use this for Unreal. And this is very important, use UV tile setting UDIMs, because we already laid out all the UV in UDIMs, and that's the best workflow to follow. Then color management, that's a really important option, and basically now everybody in the film industry is using OpenColor.io and ACES. Most of the time is ACES-CG. So here is ACES 1.2 in the version of Substance that I'm working with, and here is ACES ACES-CG. So standard sRGB color space, ACES ACES-CG. This is the color space we are using. This by default will be all correct, and you really need to start to get used to this process if you want to work in the film and television industry, mostly film. So I strongly recommend to start to use ACES-CG. Here we just load the low resolution mesh as a FBX, and we are pretty much ready to go. As you can see, the character is imported correctly. We didn't get any error. You would typically get error in some cases if you have here some UV shell touching the border, but here everything is working okay. And here in the texture set, you can see that we can switch on and off very easily different parts. Here is the body, and here is the head. And I'm going to work on the head to start. So you can see these are the UDIM, is 1001. And I'm going to start to go into the bake now. Now the baking process has been highly renewed in Substance, and has gone through a huge improvement. Here the new icon is the croissant, and here we get this new interface. We're going to start on the left, and we're going to go down, and then here we're going to choose all the maps that we want to bake, and then we're going to go here in the right side to define the parameters. Here, for example, I can collapse all the hierarchy, so it's easy to work with. And I'm going to use the head. So I'm going to select the head. Here is selected. And this could be a little confusing because there is a view icon and a checkbox here. So here is what you are seeing, and this tick box define what you are actually baking. So don't be confused. If you are looking at an object, doesn't mean that you are baking the object. So what I can do here is uncheck everything. And now I have only the head visible. And then check it again. So I'm sure I'm going to bake and view the head. Here you can only show these sets, which I think is really good. And then now you can load your high resolution mesh. Here I can start to add my high resolution head, which I decimated. And it's here, head decimated. So now you can display both. So high definition is the blue. That's the high resolution. Here you can see if there are matching error between the high res and the low res. And you can see there is a little error. So in this case, what you want to do is go here in the max frontal distance and just little by little extend the cage. See, I'm extending. So basically I'm extending how the rays are going to be projected from the high res into the low res. Now I can check all around and I can see there are no errors. So I'm basically ready to bake. Here there are other display options. I can decide if I want to see the cage or not, or the wireframe, and UV seams. This is also the projection mesh, which I can decide to display or not. And basically I'm ready to bake. What I usually do, I bake first normals, and I check everything else, ambient occlusion, and I check everything else. So in this way I can spot very easily baking problems, and if everything is okay, then I'm going to bake all the rest. And I'm going to leave the ID as a last bake. So a few more things I need to check. I need to go here in the ambient occlusion, and I'm going to extend a bit the quality. So secondary rays, I put at least at 80. And this should be a pretty good start. In the common settings, I can also change a few things. And anti-aliasing, I start at 4. And then I leave everything else the same. Here I'm going to bump up at 2K and do the first bake. So this was very fast, and now I can check the quality of the bake. I think it worked pretty well. I can see that most of the details are being preserved. There's just a little baking error in this closed area of the mouth, but that will be very easy to clean in Photoshop later. Now pressing B, I can see the baked map. So this is the ambient occlusion. I can see that the quality is pretty good. Then I can do another pass with the higher settings and check the quality. Then I can check also the normals, and they look really good. They are very clean bake. Just a few little errors along the mouth. So this is pretty good, and I'm going to bake all the other things except the ID, which are going to leave for last. Curvature, position, thickness. Let's return into painting mode and check all of them. So these are the normals. Workspace normal. The ID later. Ambient occlusion is pretty good. Curvature. You can see I'm going to get a lot of detail from the curvature. Position, thickness, and height. Everything is working well. And I'm going to bake all the rest of the pieces. Now I'll continue to bake all the pieces and checking one by one that the bake quality is good and I don't get any error. This may seem a pretty long process, and you can also decide to bake everything together, but most of the cases you're going to get quite a bit of baking errors, and I rather do this just go section by section and just make sure that each piece is baking properly and have really clean bakes, because that in the long run is going to really save me time instead of going after and try to fix all the baking mistakes. Here I'm almost done with these pieces. So as you can see, the quality of the bake is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Now the last one I'm going to bake is the ID map for all the pieces. I'm going to use a little trick here. Basically, I'm loading the low resolution mesh from Maya and use it as a high resolution mesh in order to bake the ID. In this way, that will be used to get the materials. And one last thing, I'm going to specify use material color. And now it's baking all the IDs for me. Now the material ID are set up, and you can see they're perfectly matching what I set up into Maya. If you switch to Painter, they're exactly the same IDs as you can see. Now one more thing that you should make sure before you start painting texture are some display options here, which are pretty important. Here under the environment, make sure they are also correcting the environment for ACCG. And this HDRI should match also the HDRI that you're going to use into Arnold when you're rendering. So this is very, very important. Here you can also cast a shadow, and you can preview shadows, and you can make them less or more strong. It depends what you prefer. Another thing quite important here, if you want to preview the SSS shader, which is just a preview, is not really accurate, but can give you a really good feeling for what the results will be. So here under display, you need to make sure activate subsurface scattering is on. And also in the material that you're using, that is enabled. Usually this use translucency mask is on by default, which I don't really like. I never use it, so tick this off. And this is the scatter color. Now it's set as a scale of 0.5. Usually I don't really touch this. And now in the material that you're using for your skin shader, you just need to increase the scatter. And you're going to start to preview the SSS shader. This is just a preview, it's not accurate of what you will see in Arnold, but can give you a pretty good preview in Substance. So now all the bakes are done, and that's our character. Let's have a last check at all the baked maps. This is bend normals, opacity, normals, workspace normal, ID, ambient occlusion, which will be quite important in the texturing process, curvature, position, and thickness. So we are pretty much ready to start texturing. I'm going to also follow the same steps for the backpack, and in the next chapter we're going to start to texture this guy.